It all started on a quiet Sunday morning. I was helping my stepchildren with their homework, trying to teach them some discipline and responsibility. I explained a simple lesson about honesty and effort, thinking I was guiding them in a positive way. Suddenly, my wife walked in, her expression a mixture of annoyance and impatience. "Don't lecture my kids," she said sharply. "Get your own." I paused for a moment, feeling the sting of her words. But instead of arguing, I simply smiled and said, "All right." It was a small, quiet response, but it carried weight. I realized then that this was not about confrontation, it was about patience, resilience, and the long game. Her words could have frustrated me, but I chose to respond with calm and control. That night, I reflected on her statement. On the surface, it felt like rejection. But beneath it, I understood something crucial. This was an opportunity to prove that love and responsibility are not dictated by biology or possession, but by action and heart. And in that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. I would show what it truly means to care, to guide, and to build a family even if it wasn't officially mine. The following week, I began quietly investing more time with the kids. I didn't push or lecture. Instead, I shared stories, life lessons, and small tips about responsibility. I helped them with their school projects, taught them how to manage time, and even encouraged them to pursue hobbies they had neglected. At first, they were hesitant. Some of them looked at me with suspicion, unsure if my intentions were genuine. Others challenged me openly, testing boundaries. I didn't react with anger or frustration. I simply smiled, guided them patiently, and let them see that my care wasn't conditional, it was consistent. Every small victory mattered. When the youngest completed a tricky homework problem, I praised her effort, not just the result. When the eldest took initiative to clean up without being asked, I made sure they knew their actions were noticed. Slowly, walls began to crumble. Trust began to grow. One evening, my wife watched from the doorway. I could see a mixture of surprise and doubt in her eyes. I didn't confront her or ask for recognition. I understood that the impact I was making wasn't for her approval, it was for the children and for myself. By the end of the week, I realized that her words, "Get your own," had fueled something deeper in me. Instead of resentment, I felt determination. I had a chance to lead by example, to show that love and guidance are not measured by titles, but by action and heart. As the weeks passed, I started noticing subtle changes in the kids' behavior. The initial resistance had softened into curiosity and, eventually, a quiet respect. They began to seek my advice on small matters, school projects, friendships, even personal dilemmas. One afternoon, while helping the eldest with a science project, he paused and looked at me seriously. "You always explain things differently," he said. "I think I get it better with you." I smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction. It wasn't about praise, it was about connection. I realized that trust is earned slowly through patience, consistency, and understanding. Her words, "Get your own," no longer stung. Instead, they became a reminder that I could build my own impact even without permission. At night, I reflected on my journey so far. I wasn't there to replace their father or to compete with her influence. I was there to be a steady presence, a guide, and someone they could rely on when the world seemed overwhelming. One evening, my wife caught me helping the youngest with a challenging math problem. She crossed her arms, watching silently, her expression unreadable. One didn't seek confrontation. I simply smiled and continued helping. And I realized something profound. Real influence doesn't demand acknowledgement. It grows quietly, through consistency and care, and the results, though sometimes slow to appear, are far more lasting than any argument or claim. One Saturday morning, I suggested a small family activity, just the kids and me. We baked cookies, played board games, and laughed in ways that felt rare in our household. At first, they were hesitant, unsure if this time would be different, but as the hours passed, the laughter grew genuine and the walls began to melt. During a quiet moment, the youngest hugged me tightly. "Thanks for helping me," she whispered. I could feel the sincerity in her words. That simple gesture held more weight than any praise or recognition. Later, my wife walked into the kitchen, watching us silently. There was a flicker of surprise in her eyes, maybe even a hint of respect, though she didn't speak. I didn't need her acknowledgement. My satisfaction came from seeing the kids happy, confident, and engaged. That night, I reflected on what I had learned so far. Patience, consistency, and unconditional care could achieve what arguments, orders, or authority never could. Influence isn't about forcing respect, it's about earning it, quietly and steadily. By the end of the day, I realized something powerful. Her initial dismissal, the words "get your own," had sparked a determination in me that no resistance could extinguish. This journey wasn't about proving her wrong, it was about building a bond and creating an environment of trust, care, and growth for the children. And in that moment, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be, not seeking permission, but creating impact. As time went on, the kids started sharing more of themselves with me. The eldest confided about struggles at school, the youngest about fears of being left out or failing. Each conversation was a small window into their world, and I listened without judgment, without trying to fix everything at once. I just listened, and that made all the difference. One evening, we were sitting in the living room, finishing a puzzle together. The youngest looked up and said, "I'm glad you help us, even when Mom says not to." Her words hit me like a wave. I smiled softly, realizing that her acknowledgement wasn't just about me, it was about the security and care I was providing. That night, my wife watched me quietly from the doorway, her expression unreadable. I didn't confront her or seek her approval. I simply continued my quiet work, helping the kids navigate life in small, meaningful ways. I realized something profound. Sometimes the most powerful influence is invisible. It doesn't need recognition. It doesn't need validation. It simply needs persistence, care, and patience. And with those, relationships grow stronger than words or authority ever could. Before bed, I reflected on the journey so far. Her words, "get your own," had sparked an unexpected fire in me. Instead of resenting them, I had turned them into a determination to act, to nurture, and to create bonds that could withstand resistance, doubt, or even dismissal. By now, weekends became our sacred time. The kids and I started creating small rituals: Sunday morning pancakes, evening walks in the park, and storytelling sessions where we shared lessons, fears, and dreams. The trust between us deepened quietly, and I could feel the shift in their eyes, their voices, and their confidence. One afternoon, the eldest hesitated before making a decision about a school project. I offered guidance, not instructions. "It's your choice," I said. "It'll help you think it through." After a pause, he nodded, thoughtful, and proceeded confidently. Watching him take responsibility with pride, I realized how far we had come. That night, as I tucked the youngest into bed, she whispered, "I like it when you help us, even if Mom says we shouldn't listen." I smiled, holding back the emotions swelling inside me. It wasn't about being recognized, it was about being present, steady, and reliable. For the first time, I fully understood the power of quiet influence. I didn't need to assert authority or demand attention. My actions, my patience, and my consistency were teaching lessons far stronger than any words could convey. And though my wife still remained distant, her words, "get your own," no longer stung. They'd become a challenge I had accepted and one I was quietly winning, one day, one interaction, and one moment of trust at a time. One rainy afternoon, the eldest came to me with tears in his eyes. A friend had betrayed him at school, and he felt lost and angry. I sat down beside him, not to lecture, not to judge, but to listen. I let him speak, guiding him gently to reflect on his feelings and think through his choices. By the end of our talk, he hugged me tightly. "Thanks for listening," he whispered. It wasn't about solving the problem, it was about showing him he could be trusted to share his heart without fear. I realized that this was what being a father figure truly meant: quiet support, unwavering presence, and patience. Later that evening, I caught my wife watching us from across the room. She didn't say anything, but I saw a flicker of acknowledgement in her eyes. I didn't seek her approval, it wasn't necessary. The impact I was making was real, tangible, and lasting, and that was all that mattered. I reflected on how far we had come. From skepticism and resistance, the children had grown more confident, more open, and more willing to engage. Each moment of guidance, each act of patience was planting seeds that would grow into lifelong lessons. Before bed, I whispered quietly to myself, this is more than influence, it's love, consistency, and trust. And it's unstoppable. Her words, get your own, had long since lost their sting. In their place was purpose, resilience, and the satisfaction of knowing that actions speak louder than any dismissal ever could. As the months passed, our bond grew stronger. The kids began seeking me out not for lectures or discipline, but for guidance, conversation, and support. They trusted me, relied on me, and gradually I became a quiet pillar in their lives. One afternoon, while helping the youngest with a difficult reading assignment, she looked up and said, "You always make it easier to understand." Her words weren't about me, they were about the patience, consistency, and care I brought into her life. I smiled, realizing that my impact was no longer invisible, it was felt deeply, though quietly. That evening, my wife commented, almost offhandedly, "They seem happier when you're around." I didn't respond, only continued reading with the kids. My actions had begun to speak louder than any acknowledgement she might give. Later, reflecting on the journey, I realized that her words, "get your own," had been a challenge I accepted without complaint. Instead of creating resentment, they motivated me to show that genuine care transcends titles, authority, or biology. By the end of the day, I understood something vital. Influence isn't demanded, it's earned. Trust isn't forced, it's nurtured. And love, the kind that changes lives, is demonstrated through patience, guidance, and quiet presence. One evening, the eldest came to me with a dilemma. He had been invited to a party where he felt unsure of how to act. Instead of telling him what to do, I asked questions, guiding him to think critically about his choices and the consequences. He listened intently, nodding, and eventually smiled with confidence in his own decision. Later, the youngest proudly showed me a drawing she had made, inspired by a story I had told her. "I want to do it like you," she said shyly. I hugged her tightly, knowing that the moments I shared had begun shaping their character in meaningful ways. That night, as I reflected, I realized how far we had come. The initial skepticism, resistance, and even outright dismissal had faded. In their place was trust, admiration, and an unspoken bond that could not be broken by words or arguments. My wife, watching from the doorway once more, said nothing. One didn't seek confrontation or acknowledgement. I had learned that true influence and guidance do not require validation, they are measured by the impact left on the hearts and minds of those you care for. As I tucked the kids into bed, I whispered to myself, this is more than teaching, it's shaping lives quietly, steadfastly, and with love. And nothing can undo that. The weeks turned into months, and the transformation became undeniable. The children no longer hesitated to come to me with questions, doubts, or just to share their day. Our bond had grown from cautious distance to genuine trust and mutual respect. One evening, after a long day of helping with homework and listening to their stories, the eldest said softly, "I'm glad you're here, even if Mom didn't want you to be." The youngest nodded in agreement, smiling shyly. In that moment, I realized the true victory wasn't in defying my wife, it was in becoming the figure they could rely on, the person who guided them with patience, love, and consistency. I thought back to her words, "get your own." They no longer carried sting or resentment. Instead, they had been the spark that pushed me to show up day after day in ways that mattered most. Later that night, as I reflected quietly in the living room, I understood the most important lesson of all. Influence isn't demanded, authority isn't imposed, and love isn't dictated by words alone. True impact comes from presence, consistency, and heart. And as I watched them sleep peacefully, I whispered softly to myself, I showed up, I stayed, I cared. And in doing so, I gave them something no words could ever take away. The journey had been long, challenging, and often frustrating, but in the end, it had built something far more enduring than argument or confrontation ever could: trust, love, and a quiet, Uncheckable bond that would last a lifetime. The end.